First question for today is when self-editing before querying, at what point should you bring in beta readers and at what point should you stop getting feedback and hit submit? Before I answer this question specifically, I do want to point out that there's a couple of different phases that your manuscript should go through. And there are different types of people that you can use to get feedback. So, of course, you're going to finish your first draft and then you're going to be doing editing. Some people use what's called an alpha reader. An alpha reader is somebody who's seeing super, super, super rough drafts, like super rough drafts, something that you wouldn't share with just anybody, but somebody that you trust to give you feedback as you're writing the book. This is also a role that critique partners can make. Critique partners are other writers, usually other writers, that you have a relationship with where you swap feedback. So you give feedback on something that they've submitted to you, you give feedback on something they've submitted to you. Anyways, you get it. So you can have critique partners. You can also have a critique group. Critique groups and critique partners are great because usually these are people who are, if not writing the same genre that you are, hopefully at least familiar with it, but familiar with giving critique and used to honing in on the problems that need to be addressed. So then, if you're not using critique partners or in conjunction with critique partners, you may also want to use beta readers. The purpose of beta readers is different than critique partners. Now, sometimes people conflate them, but the point of having critique partners and having beta readers is because they serve two different functions. Beta readers are just that. When we talk about beta, beta is when you're testing something. So beta readers usually come in once the book is finished. Critique partners and alpha readers can come in at any time. They come in at different points of your writing because they're going to be seeing some rough drafts, especially alpha readers and critique partners are going to be seeing rough drafts. Beta readers are meant for when you have a draft and now you're testing the theory. So just as a non-writing example, I do a course called Book Boss Strategy Intensive Group Coaching, and I held a beta round for a lower price because I wanted to test the process. The framework was in place, so I had the whole course created, but I wanted to test it to see what needed to be improved. So that's a beta test. It's when you're testing something that's done in a rough draft form, but not finalized because you need to find out what still needs to be improved. So beta readers come in when you need somebody to give you feedback on specific things. And this is where a lot of authors sometimes go wrong is they think that a beta reader is just going to read it and give general feedback. You want a beta reader, you want to give your beta reader specific things to look for, specific questions to answer. Don't just hand them the book and say, hey, what do you think of this? But instead, hand your beta reader the book and say, okay, there's a few key things that I want you to answer after you've read it. Here's the things that I'm wondering about. So ask them for specific feedback. Don't just ask them for general feedback. So in the beta round comes when you finish your draft. So to answer the question, at what point should you bring in beta readers? After you've finished your draft, you may have gone through some self-edits. I usually suggest going through some self-edits first, then bring in the beta readers to test and see what you've missed, what you've fixed, what you were still struggling with. That's the point that you should bring in beta readers. Don't bring in beta readers when you're in the middle of editing. Those are alpha readers. Don't bring in beta readers when you've got everything finalized and you're just looking for reviews. Those are advanced reader copy reviewers. Those are ARC reviewers. So beta readers come after the manuscript is roughly done and you're setting it aside for yourself to give yourself a little break from it. And now you're just going to be thinking about, what comes next. And you want to be thinking about that while the beta readers are working on what they need to work on. So at what point, I'm going to need to go back. At what point should you stop getting feedback and hit submit? Well, yes, you can workshop something, over workshop something. And I would just say that you're going to select your group of beta readers. You have identified the issues. You're going to fix whatever they identify, and then you're going to hit submit when you're querying. Of course, this is different than if you're going to be publishing yourself, because when you're publishing yourself, you're going to be using an editor, maybe several editors. If you're doing a developmental and light editor, you might also have a copy editor and a proofreader. Beta readers can come at different points during that process. You may want them to come before the edit so that you can get the book in as great a shape as possible in order to deliver it to the editor. And you may want it to come after the edit or after the edits, after you've worked on it for several rounds with somebody else, just to see if there are certain spots that are still not clear to the readers.